Welcome to the Missionary Mobilization Podcast, a resource for Christian leaders who want to increase the number of missionaries around the world. This podcast is a ministry of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention at Trinity Bible College and Graduate School. Visit us online at missionarymobilization.org. Now, here's your host, the founder and director of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention, David Jacob.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Missionary Mobilization Podcast. Our goal is to equip and encourage mobilizers and missions pastors from around the world. And please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app. And if you want to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, well, that would help us to reach more listeners, and we'd really appreciate that. We've got thousands of unique downloads, and your help is helping us to reach more listeners. So we'd love it if you'd continue to share this podcast with a friend, and please let us know how you like it, or if you've got some suggestions for any show topics. You can email us at hello@missionarymobilization.org. Today's show is sponsored by Nations Coffee. You can check them out at nationscoffee.co to order some freshly roasted beans that ship right to your door. $1 from every bag sold goes towards unreached missions efforts, including our ministry. So who knew that you can reach the nations with a cup of coffee? And this is good coffee too we're talking about. It's the official coffee of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention. So visit nationscoffee.co. Our topic today is missionaries in an age of global Christianity, and our guest is Dr. Todd Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the Eva B. and Paul E. Toms Distinguished Professor of Mission and Global Christianity and co-director of the Center for the Study of Global Christianity at Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary. Johnson is also the visiting research fellow at Boston University's Institute for Culture, Religion, and World Affairs, leading a research project on international religious demography. He is co-author of the World Christian Encyclopedia, both second and third editions, co-editor of the Atlas of Global Christianity, and series editor with Ken Ross of the 10-volume Edinburgh Companions to Global Christianity series. He's also the co-editor of the World Christian Database and the World Religion Database. Dr. Johnson holds a PhD from William Carey International University. Well, Dr. Johnson, your bio certainly is a mouthful. You are one busy guy contributing to all this research, and we're so grateful for your contribution. So welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Well, I think this is an important topic that we discuss some of these, some of the demographics and the stats on world Christianity as we work to mobilize more missionaries. So can you talk to us a little bit about some significant geographical missionary sending changes that have occurred in the last 20 to 50 years or so?
Sure, and really, I mean, this is probably the most important fact about Christianity that relates directly to missions. And it really is, where are Christians? Who are Christians? You know, what is the different geographical location of Christians? And to get a little bit more dramatic, we can go back a whole 100 years, even 120 years to 1900. And we see that about 82% of all Christians in 1900 were Europeans or North Americans, you know, in the United States. Today, that's 33%, and that's what everybody refers to as the shift of Christianity to the global South. You know, so that's pretty profound, and that's actually been going on even in the last 50 years or so. We think the 50% mark was reached probably around 1981 or so about 40 years ago. And now it's 67% of all Christians, 2/3, maybe is a good way to think about it, are in the global South. The global South is Africa, Asia, Latin America, Oceania. And that's pretty profound. So any discussion about, you know, what's happening in missions today has to take that into account. And um, maybe it's important for us to realize too that for evangelicals, so self-identified evangelicals, the shift has been even more profound. If we go back to 1900 again, 92% of all evangelicals were in the global north, leaving only 8% in the south, and that changed now to only 23% of evangelicals in the global north. So fully 77% of all evangelicals today are in the global south. So for the evangelical community, this has been even a more profound shift. And of course, with that, we'd expect to see changes in who is sending missionaries. But you can go back pretty far again and find African missionaries and Asian missionaries. In fact, if we go way back to the beginning of Christianity, it's largely a story that they were telling of sending missionaries out all over the world. But in the modern period, there were missionaries from Africa, Asia, Latin America, even much earlier on. And of course, that's what we see when we look at the present situation. We know there are lots of missionaries sent from Brazil and from the Philippines, from India, from Nigeria, from Kenya, and then surprisingly even from China. So that's really the big story when we talk about missionary sending, is the shift of Christianity itself and then of the sending of missionaries from the global south. And of course, it's good news because Christianity, as we know, is a faith for all peoples. It's not meant to be concentrated in one part of the world. So the fact that it's more global now than it was 100 years ago is good news. And the fact that when people go out to share the good news where it hasn't been shared before, and they come from all over the world, that's also very good news because it shows that this is not associated with one particular country or culture. It's really something special. It's good news for all people, as we thought about at Christmas this year, of the tidings of great joy. And so this is really an exciting subject, and it's a very good development in the history of Christianity.
It sure is, and I'm glad that other countries are sending more and more missionaries as well. So let's talk about the flip side of that for a minute. There are some significant geographical missionary receiving changes that have occurred as well in the last 20 to 50 years. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is perhaps a little bit more complicated subject, even to understand what's going on, because you'd think that with the shift of Christianity to the south, that it would become more obvious, where Christians would go as missionaries. They would go to, well, maybe like India and China, which is, the two largest countries in the world. And of course, there are many people who do that. But with increased mobility, we also have missionaries going, from, let's say, from Nigeria to the United States. And so it's a more complicated story. We also have a lot of missionaries going to countries that are already heavily Christian. For example, Brazil sends out an amazing number of missionaries, but also receives a very large number of missionaries, about 20,000, we think. And by the way, this includes, when we say missionaries, we're talking about foreign missionaries, people who go to another country, and we're including all forms of Christianity because we're using the word Christian here, which would include Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, Independent, all of that. And so Brazil receives about 20,000 missionaries. Bangladesh, which of course is a majority Muslim country, we think only receives about 1,000 missionaries. So that doesn't quite make sense if if your purpose is to spread the gospel where it's never gone before. But there's lots of reasons to be a missionary. So And migration plays a role in this too, as it always has. So, there's Brazilian missionaries in the United States, Brazilian missionaries in the United Kingdom, following patterns of migration. Now, in their initial work is usually among people of the same kind, or Brazilians, let's say. But they're still foreign missionaries in our counting because they've crossed into a new country, and sometimes foreign missionaries will work with their own people. That's actually been a long-standing part of Christian missions. So that's why it's complicated. So there's different things going on for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of variables at play here, but correct me if I'm wrong, the fact remains that most missionaries go to places where the church already exists. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And maybe to oversimplify, there's a good reason and a bad reason. Okay, so the good reason is the success of churches growing and needing help, and this in the direction of help nowadays is not really simply Westerners going to the global South or that sort of thing. You got people going in all directions helping. Brazilians go to Angola because in Angola there's Portuguese, is spoken. So and Angola has lots of Christians, but that doesn't mean Brazilians shouldn't go there. You see, so that part of what's happened is that places where the gospel has been planted and grown are places where the church actually invites people to come in many cases. And that's another reason why Christian situations perhaps have more missionaries, because non-Christian cultures are not in the habit of inviting missionaries. Okay, so if invitations are one of the ways that you get there, and it is one of the primary ways, then you'd expect that to happen. So let's say that's a good thing generally. And of course, we want Christians to have contact with other Christians from all over the world. That's positive too. So we want to emphasize that. Okay, if there's a negative side, I didn't mention, but one of the findings in our research is that there are about 45,000 Christian denominations in the world. Okay, so one way in which Christian situations, let's say, attract more missionaries is because their particular denomination is not present in that country. And this isn't necessarily negative. Again, maybe you really like your denomination and you think other people might like it as well. And so you send people into a largely Christian situation where your denomination does not exist. So maybe everybody's Methodist and you're Baptist and you send people there, or everybody's Presbyterian and you're Methodist and you send. And of course, in each of these cases, there's hundreds of kinds of Presbyterians and Methodists and so on. So let's say, generally speaking, then, that the negative factor here would be competition, if we want to just put it that way. Although that's not, again, the whole story, but it is part of the story. And we probably don't want to see too much of that. We want variety. There's no reason why different denominations should not exist, in different Christian situations. But it get a little out of control after a while, and no one is giving people permission or not for this. It's an open field, so to speak. So maybe that's one of the reasons that that there's so many missionaries in Christian situations is competition.
Well, it's fascinating food for thought. We appreciate your insights and your research into this. We do know also that since 2008, the numbers of long-term missionaries sent from the U.S. here, where we're based, has been declining. I'm wondering if you see this trend continuing, and if so, what can be done to help increase these numbers?
Right. Again, fairly complicated situation because of who we're talking about here. And the first complication is that from our perspective of trying to measure every kind of missionary, the numbers are actually increasing. So what is decreasing? You're actually correct to say there's a decrease. The decrease is really more among the traditional sending models, which keep the best track of what they're doing. We work closely with all of the agencies, and they're very professional, keep close track, and their figures are published in handbooks and that kind of a thing. So that's definitely happening. And we talk about evangelical Protestants, this is what we've been tracking as well, sort of a decline there. But at the same time, I'll just mention first, at the same time, there's two other kinds of sending that's taking place. One is from independent denominations, let's say, or networks, because they don't like the word denomination, who are sending missionaries all over the world, and they're not part of this, this kind of historic assessment that the normal longer-term agencies are involved in. And they send a lot of people, and they're very hard to track because there's so many different groups. So that's one thing we're trying hard to assess. What does that mean? And then the other thing, which you're probably familiar with, is what's been called direct sending from churches. Maybe especially larger churches might just send missionaries to the other side of the world. They're not in any agency. They're not even an independent agency. They're just living on the other side of the world. I knew a small church in Louisiana that had a missionary couple in Siberia for 30 years, and they're not in any book, I mean, they just work but they're missionaries, I mean, from the definition, and they're even harder to track. But being a person who travels to churches a lot in the United States, I always go to the missionary board, with the map and everything, and without fail, I locate the three kinds of missionaries out of every kind of. So I've got your traditional boards, that have this wonderful history and so on, and then I see some people in the independent networks that have been sent, and then there's the direct sending people. Almost every church is involved in some way or another. So that's been a tough thing for us because obviously the handbooks, keep better track of things. Now, going back to that, I think one of the things that it bodes well for the future of mission from the United States is actually the increasing diversity of Christianity in the United States. And so now there's, when we say American missionaries or missionaries from the United States, we're talking about a very diverse group of people, not just European descendants, let's say. So that's actually part of the exciting side of things. And they're not necessarily just going back to their country, but they're showing up all over the world. So when you meet an American missionary in the future, even now, but especially in the future, they could be, their ethnic and cultural and linguistic background could be from anywhere in the world. They might have been born in Nigeria, grew up in New York City, and they're now working in Japan. I mean, there's any combination is possible. And I think from our perspective, I think this is starting to maybe turn things around a little bit for many agencies. Even in the leadership of agencies, you see many changes because we work closely with a lot of the agencies, and some are run by people who were born in Nigeria. As I said, I've just used that as an example, but there's actually a major agency in the United States where that's true. So, yeah, I mean, it's, but again, we probably want people from the, let's say, the historic European communities to continue to be involved in mission. And for mission mobilizers, I think that's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is wonderful that the missions force being sent from the U.S. is becoming more and more diverse. It is disheartening that some of those numbers are declining, and so we hope and pray that God continues to speak to people, and that they obey and listen, and are sent around the world. And so, as the missionary force being sent, is so diverse, not just from the States here, but from other countries as well. How can missionaries sent from the West better partner with our brothers and sisters from the global South?
Yeah, that's really a great question, because it's really the future of mission. It's not really just from one country to other places. And when I think about this, I think about the conference I attended in 2017, the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. So I was in Wittenberg, Germany, with lots of other people, and we were, celebrating that. I presented research showing that over 40% of all Protestants in 2017 were Africans. But there were only about 6 or 7 Africans at this meeting of 100 people. So they were way underrepresented, which is a challenge in itself. But then someone got up in front of the group and said, we want Africans to know that they are welcome at the table in this particular organization that I was in. And I happened to be sitting next to a Ghanaian Christian who was a statesperson, a well-known person, and he leaned over to our little group and he said, "We have a proverb in Ghana, and the proverb is, it's good for you to invite me to the table, but it's better if you invite me in the kitchen." And I've been studying this for many years. When I heard that, I thought, this is what I've been sort of struggling to articulate, what this shift is all about. And in response to your question, this is the answer. The answer is not recruiting people from the global South to do Western things. I mean, that probably would work in many situations, but it's not really the answer for what missions is all about in this age of global Christianity. But it's really a shift in leadership, and it's not Western people disappearing, and just doing nothing. It's of course relearning what it's like to be equal, in a sense, and making sure everyone has a sort of an equal voice in this. So that to me is the future. It's a true partnership, a true collaboration, and I think there's encouraging signs of that happening. And actually, the one interesting thing is we mentioned the increasing diversity in the United States, and this is really the place you'd expect there to be good collaboration, because we already have people from all over the world in virtually every neighborhood. So why not, take that as a strength? A place that would be a good place to learn how to collaborate is right where we are here in the United States. So I'm hopeful about that.
Amen. That's good advice. Do you have any data on U.S. churches that are ministering cross-culturally to the diaspora in the United States? I know a lot of mission agencies and churches, as we become more and more diverse, long to minister to the diaspora here in the States. And so just wondering if you have any data on what churches are doing, or how that diaspora population might be shifting, or anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're a center for the study of global Christianity, so we try very hard to focus, on the 234 countries in the world, and but we're here in Boston. We see diaspora communities right here in Boston. In my work at Boston University, I work with Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and so on. So I get to participate in that in the scholarly side. There's really two meanings to diaspora, by the way, in this, which we've already touched on, and that is that a lot of diaspora in the United States is actually Christian. So some of the groups we've been talking about, and that's very true in Boston. In fact, they talk about the decline of Christianity in Boston, and yet there's a quiet revival. That's what it's been called. Quiet revival that is people from all over the world who are Christians in Boston who are faithfully carrying out their discipleship and evangelism and all of that. So that has to be kept in mind. When we say diaspora, we're talking about a lot of Christians in that. But I think what you're referring to, is the non-Christian diaspora, we might say. And we don't have a lot of really good data on it, but of course we interact with people all the time, and we know of people that are training Christians in the United States to be better at reaching across. We also know that there's been traditionally problems in this area, ranging from, for example, the vast majority of international students that come to study in the United States never end up inside of an American home. We know this because my wife teaches English, and we invite people during the holidays and ask them if they've ever been in a home, and they say this is the first time. Almost everybody, So hospitality is an issue, and then of course there's strong anti-immigrant sentiment now. So this is this question sort of clashes with how people feel about people from other countries. I mean, a lot of Christians in the United States don't think people should be building mosques or temples, and I mean that's difficult because obviously this country is a great country to be anything because we have freedom of religion here, and everyone should be able to thrive, and so that's another type of hospitality, I guess. But it, just to say, I think it's really important that people are welcomed here when they're guests. Let's say, as international, or when they're international students, or when they're moving permanently here as well. I think it's a terrific opportunity. So it's good that people are paying attention to it, and I hope we see more studies in the future. But I think, and just anecdotally, obviously it's been on the rise until recently, and we'll have to see what happens. We've got lots of variables out there right now with the coronavirus and with immigration law and all of that. So yeah, but it's a good thing to bring up for sure.
Most definitely. Well, you and I are both involved in training and preparing the next generation of ministers and missionaries and church leaders. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, do you see anything that might need to shift in missionary training as we prepare students for the changing landscape of this diverse mission field that we've been discussing?
Yeah, I think this goes back to when I first got involved in mission in Southern California, the U.S. Center for World Mission in the 1980s. The first thing I ever wrote was actually a review of a book called Habits of the Heart. And I think the subtitle of the book is Individualism in American Life. And I suggested that missionaries should read that book before going anywhere, because it's important as a missionary not simply to study other cultures and languages, which is your main job probably, but to also perceive your own. What is your own situation? And I was thinking about this again recently, reading a colleague's book called Reading While Black. Esau McCauley, who's at Wheaton, wrote, and he's one of our graduates. He wrote a really great book about reading the scriptures as a black person. And when I was reading his book, I was thinking, this reminds me that what I've been doing all these years is reading while white. All right, because I'm Scandinavian, in background, from Minnesota originally, and so on. So, and yet there's not a book in our library that has that title. So there's a lack of self-awareness of culture. And you don't want to be an expert on other cultures and not even think you have a culture yourself. So I feel like this still, all these years later, after reading that book, I thought this is really still, and it's especially important now that Christianity is much more diverse and much more global. So recognizing that Western Christianity or white Christianity is not the standard, sort of, the unspoken standard by which everything else is measured. Because we have courses here on theology, and then if you're adventurous, you take a course on Asian theology. But what is this other theology? It can't be one without context, So anyway, I think that's a good place to start, and I think, and that maybe is how we're going to be able to get more people from around the world in the kitchen, by recognizing that there is a context for European or white culture that is significant and needs to be recognized.
That's really, really insightful, and we will be sure to link to those resources that you mentioned on our show notes if you visit missionarymobilization.org. Well, as we wrap things up, I want to give you a few minutes to just maybe talk about some other research findings that you think would be important to our audience to understand that maybe we haven't had a chance to discuss yet today.
Yes, I think in relation to other world religions, one of our most important findings is related to friendship and personal contact across religious boundaries. And quite simply, we've uncovered the fact that about 87% of all Buddhists, Hindus, and Muslims do not personally know a Christian. So we feel like this must be one of the biggest challenges for Christians around the world. And getting back to, again, the diversity of Christianity and the global nature of Christianity, I was in Singapore a few years ago reading the newspaper in the morning, and there was a study there that said 9 out of 10 Singaporeans are comfortable living and working with people of other cultures and religions. And now Singapore is the most diverse country in the world because there's no majority. I mean, there's Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, Christians. Nobody's in a majority. So I thought, no, this is remarkable. And I've lived in Singapore a couple of occasions in the past. And I thought to myself, while I was reading, I thought, I just read similar poll results in the United States that would be more like 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 maybe, that are comfortable. And I thought, well, why are the people in the United States writing the books telling us how to get along with people in other religions? And so I was on a year sabbatical in Thailand at the time, and everywhere I went, I encouraged Asian leaders to write for us about how to get along, because they actually have the intuitive sense of how to do it. So I think, our biggest challenge is personal contact, because we're an incarnational faith. I mean, all the technology that we have, it's great, let's use it. But when it comes down to it, we're a face-to-face religion. We're a friendship religion. And so this is our big challenge. But I think, again, that global Christianity around the world can assist us in getting to become friends with people in other religions and share the gospel, share the good news of Jesus.
Absolutely. Well, if our listeners would like to know more and to learn more about some of this data and your research, how might they go about that?
Yeah, we have some resources at www.globalchristianity.org. And you can go there, and there's some videos and there's actually some charts and graphs and maps if you like that kind of thing. And we'll keep you up to date on our research. We're studying women in world Christianity right now and hope to have some publications out in the next couple of years and that sort of thing. So please visit us there, and there's a place to contact us if you have any questions as well.
It's an incredible resource, one that is bookmarked on my computer, and I frequent often in my own studies and teaching here. And so we will link to that again on our show notes. And if you'd like to learn more about mission sending, we want to introduce you to Trinity Graduate School's Master of Arts, Intercultural Studies, with an optional concentration in missions mobilization. So this degree is specifically designed for not only missionaries, but missions pastors and agency mobilizers. And so you can visit trinitybiblecollege.edu for more information. Well, Dr. Johnson, it was so very insightful and great having you on the show today. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all your hard work.
Absolutely. Well, until next time, everyone, let's keep praying for more laborers to work in His harvest fields.
You've been listening to the Missionary Mobilization Podcast, a ministry of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention at Trinity Bible College and Graduate School. You can access free resources online at missionarymobilization.org. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Missionary Mobilization. Thanks for listening.